Slakia. I hit the power button by accident. So just to continue on, this is the book of Revelation chapter 12 and verse 12. And it says, "Therefore rejoice ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth he hath but a short time." And yes, so this man is going to do any and everything in his power to pretty much, try to stay in this position. But ultimately, he knows that his time to rule is pretty much up, But again, just on a smaller scale, before that happens again, there's going to be, riots. There's going to be looting, there's going to be famines, things are going to be taking place to where, all hell is going to break loose, So I'm going to come to the book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 15, and I'm going to start at verse 14. It says, "Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up, and fight against another, and swords in their hands. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their action shall stand in their power." Slakia. "A man shall desire to go into a city, and shall not be able. Because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, and the houses shall be destroyed, and all men shall be afraid. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword, and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation." And yes, ultimately, once all hell breaks loose, ultimately that's going to be one of the factors, during the time of Jacob's trouble, we're going to be in the midst of a famine. So, people are pretty much going to invade other people's houses, with guns. They're going to be armed. And pretty much like it said, a man isn't going to have pity on his neighbor. So pretty much, someone's neighbor is pretty much going to go into their other neighbor's home armed to take their goods. They're going, people are really going to be ready to, I'm not going to say ready, people are going to be willing, to kill, to survive, ultimately, because that's what these people are going to do. They're going to kill each other, for their goods. And that's what they're saying, no man is going to have pity, spoiling their goods. Ultimately, if someone has extra food, like you see these doomsday preppers, they pretty much video themselves of the things that they're stocking up and this and that, especially if they show exactly where they're storing it. People are going to use that, and ultimately come up against these people, So it's going to be an extremely bad time, upon this earth. So I'm going to come to the book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 16. And I'm going to start at 17. And it says, woe is me, who will deliver me in those days?" So, just to real quick, reincarnation is a real thing. It is biblical. And this is pretty much Esdras saying, because he's going to be here. He's back on this earth, right now. Now, who is Esdras today? We don't know. But he's pretty much saying, who's going to deliver him, because he's seen the things that are taking place, and are going to take place in this current time that we're living in. Verse 18, "The beginning of sorrows and great mournings, the beginning of famine and great death, the beginning of wars, and the powers shall stand in fear. the beginning of evils. What shall I do when these evils shall come? Behold, famine and plague, tribulation and anguish are sent as scourges for a moment, but for all these things shall not but for all these things they shall not turn from their wickedness, nor be always merciful of the scourges. And it says, behold, victuals shall be so good, cheap upon earth, that they shall think themselves to be in good case. And then evil shall grow upon the earth, sword, famine, and great confusion. So yes, just like, for example, last week, McDonald's and Wendy's had those cheap burgers, Wendy's selling their penny burgers and, McDonald's selling their 50-cent burgers, And then you had a mass recall of, ground beef because it tested positive for E. coli, And pretty much you have these major fast food chains, pushing out, these burgers for cheap. So pretty much, again, those are cheap victuals, but ultimately these things are gonna help, add to the famine, Verse 22, it says, for many of them that dwell upon earth shall perish of famine, and the other that escape the hunger shall the sword destroy. And yes, some people are going to survive the famine, but they're ultimately going to be killed, whether it be by, the gun, a knife, or however, ultimately the sword, is going to destroy them. Even if that sword being, the ICBM missiles, that's the ultimate sword, that is going to come upon this place. Slakia. Verse 23, and it says, and the dead shall be cast out as dung, and there shall be no man to comfort them, for the earth shall be wasted, and the cities shall be cast down. So there's going to be so much death out here. You're pretty much going to be stepping over bodies because that's how many people are going to die. A lot of people are going to die out here. And pretty much that's what it said. There's going to be no one to comfort. There's going to be so many dead bodies, no one's going to be able to bury them. It's like now, before our hell breaks loose, you're still able to, have funerals. People are still able to have funerals, for their loved ones. But when this time comes, you aren't going to be able to bury the dead, You're just going to be dead bodies in the street. Verse 24 says, there shall be no man left to till the earth and to sow it. The trees shall give fruit, and who shall gather them? The grapes shall ripen, and who shall tread them? For all places shall be desolate of men, so that one man shall desire to see another and to hear his voice. So yes, pretty much certain places, like now you have men that pretty much do landscaping, but again, in that time to come, no one's going to till the earth. So pretty much, grass is going to be overgrown, trees, and, it's pretty much, going to turn into a wilderness, Well, I don't want to necessarily say a wilderness, but pretty much, you're going to have, the greenery, it's going to be overgrown, No man's going to be able to cut the grass, to till the earth. And then also, like a lot of people, are also going to be taken to concentration camps as well. So just like it says, one man is going to be in the city, desiring to hear another man's voice. So ultimately, you may be one of very few people left in your city, after these things take place, Verse 28 says, for of a city there shall be 10 left, and of the field, and 2 of the field, which shall hide themselves in the thick groves and in the clefts of the rocks, as in an orchard of olives. Upon every tree there are left 3 or 4 olives, or as when a vineyard is gathered, there are left some clusters of them that diligently seek through the vineyard. Even so in those days there shall be 3 or 4 left by them that search their houses with the sword. So, ultimately, when people's houses get raided, there may be some people that are left, they may, survive. There may be 3 or 4 people that pretty much survive, houses being ransacked by, these marauders, or these groups of people out here that are pretty much going to take, whatever they want. Verse 32, and the earth shall be laid waste, and the fields thereof shall wax old, and her ways and all her paths shall grow full of thorns, because no man shall travel therethrough. The virgin shall mourn, having no bridegrooms. The women shall mourn, having no husbands. The daughters shall mourn, having no helpers. And in the wars shall their bridegrooms be destroyed, and their husbands shall perish of famine. And yes, that's going to be another thing, once World War III officially kicks off, there's going to be a draft. So a lot of men, are going to be drafted into this war, and that the men that aren't drafted, that are still over here in America, a lot of these men, of course, not the men of the Lord, but, these other men, they're ultimately going to die by the famine, like it says, So a lot of women are going to be vulnerable, during this time, So that's what it says, These women are going to mourn because pretty much they won't have a man to protect them, It's going to be an extremely bad time upon this earth. It's the book of Zechariah, chapter 14 and verse 2. And it says, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. So yes, like I mentioned, you are going to have people that are going to be thrown into, these FEMA camps, and ultimately a lot of women are going to be vulnerable out here, so they're going to be ravished. Like it says, a lot of women are going to be taken by force, because women and children pretty much are spoils of war. Once you go to war with another nation, you will take that nation's women, and either slaughter, the males, or keep the young women, to pretty much raise them up to be wives and concubines. But it's going to be bad because there's more women, than men. So a lot of women are going to die as well, But again, and this is just how serious this time is, It's going to be extremely serious. People think that nothing bad is going to happen, but ultimately, the men of the Lord are telling these people what's going to happen, And pretty much once, the famine of the word takes place, they won't be able to understand what's happening, or what's taking place, So I'm going to end it on this, the book of Jeremiah, chapter 15. I'm going to start at verse 1. And it says, then said the Lord unto me, though Moses and Samuel stood before me, yet my mind cannot be toward this people, Cast them out of my sight, and let them go forth. And it shall come to pass, if they say unto thee, whither shall we go? Then thou shalt tell them, thus saith the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, such as for death to death, and such as are for the sword to the sword, and such as are for the famine to the famine, and such as are for the captivity to the captivity. And I will appoint over them 4 kinds, saith the Lord, the sword to slay, and the dogs to tear, and the fowls of the heaven, and the beasts of the earth to devour and destroy. So yes, wild animals are also going to, attack people as well. That's going to become more and more common. People being attacked by wild animals and even, newly created creatures. That's how bad it's going to be. The Lord is pretty much going to unleash, on Babylon the Great. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Kakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till the next time I say Shalom.